Hey guys and girls, in this video we'll be looking at the Polyphenom Advanced Hybrid Synthesizer. It is a new synthesizer from us at Ocean Swift Synthesis. The concept here is a hybrid of additive and subtractive synthesis elements along with FM synthesis elements. For all sound examples and everything else, just go to the website oceanswift.net/polyphenom, and all the information and all the sound in the world is over there. In this video, just like to overview the features and functions of the synth, just to give you a quick look at it. So as you see here, I'm in the standalone version of the synth. The synth comes in either standalone or VSTi, 64 or 32-bit for Windows operating systems. So in the standalone mode, your controls on the top. There's some things that are not existing in the VST mode, which is the selection for the audio driver, the BPM, because there is no host, and the MIDI driver. Currently I'm with my Akai MBK. And the MIDI channel over here. Next up, you have the presets, the factory patches. There are a lot of factory patches. There's 127 in this preset file, and you have another preset bank file over here that you can load, which is a second bank of presets. It takes it a second to load, and there we go. And another full bank of really cool factory presets. Next up, you have over here a little widget for resizing the GUI. Maybe I shouldn't do this while we're capturing video, but you can resize the GUI a little bit. Not really to small sizes because the graphics here are not vectorized, but we do give you the option to just a little bit resize the GUI, the front panel. So that's for the main settings over here on the top. And then we get into the synthesis itself. So as you can see over here, it looks just kind of like a really big mixer. What these are on every one of these pages, you have two pages over here, which you switch over here. Every one of these pages are just basically 8 sine oscillators. So 8 harmonics per page for a total of 16 harmonics, which each one is an identical channel and gives control for the specific harmonic that you set. Now, on our previous device, if you had a look at Aeolian meditation, let's say the first 8 harmonics would be a harmonic series. As you can see, it is set up this way over here. First harmonic, second harmonic, third harmonic, fourth harmonic, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and continuing on to the 16th. But you don't have to. A cool option on Polyphenom is that you can enter into each one of these and input really funky harmonics, whatever you want. So again, what are these harmonics? What they are is a multiplication of the base incoming frequency. So let's say I'm playing a middle C note on this preset over here, then it will be playing the first harmonic and the 3.7th harmonic, the third harmonic, the fourth harmonic, and so on, whatever you set over here. So this is a really cool feature because you can get really sort of dissonant sounds and all sorts of crazy bells and stuff. It was actually on the first bank. I think we had some neat bell examples. Let's see. So over here you see these harmonics are really strange. You look at how far you can go with the decimal points. And you can create really dissonant sounds. So this is a really interesting feature. Maybe worth to mention over here, this is the main slider, the main volume for each and every one of these harmonics. So you can actually shut them all down. And over here you have a little widget, to kind of quickly play with them. And this would be the main volume for each one of these channels. But you also have some more additional modulation going on the volume. The first thing is, well, this is not exactly the volume per se, but it's panning. So you can actually pan each one of these 16 harmonics. Whichever ones you use up to the 16, you can actually pan them for a left and right stereo picture. And this again is especially cool if you're using stuff like dissonant harmonics. You could do something like, let's say, just for an example, you can write 2.9 here, and then maybe 3 over here, and then maybe 3.1 over here, and take each one of these, and kind of give them a little bit of volume, and then take the dissonant ones and kind of pan them in stereo, and for example, and then keep the actual bass harmonic in the middle. Now, obviously this is frequency multiplication, so 2.9 might not be exactly, adding exactly like adding 1.0 to the frequency, but you get the idea. You can make really cool dissonant things using the panning and using the frequency setting, the frequency multiplier, let's say. And then the last thing over here on each channel is a modulator. So not only can you set the static volume, not only can you set the stereo picture, but you have 4 options for 4 modulators that you can use to modulate the volume. Basically think of it as moving this fader knob automatically. So over here would be the modulation depth, how deep the modulation would go. If it would be all the way, then it would be moving it a lot more than if it would be just a tiny bit. And over here you choose which of the 4 available modulators will modulate the selected channel. So let's go look right over here to the modulators. So this little strip over here, this is actually the modulators that are referenced to over here. And again, this is set up in pages. So the first page over here will show modulators number 1 and number 2. And the second page will show modulators number 3 and number 4. Let's jump to them in just a second, but let's first just finish off over here. So again, this is just the menu. You go from the 1st to the 16th to jump between the pages. Here you can set the basic offset octave for whatever MIDI is incoming into the additive oscillator. And over here you can set the pitch bend range for the whole device. It's kind of over here, there wasn't really where to drop it, so we just kind of placed it over here. But there it is. So that would be the pitch bend range for everything. So let's get back to the modulators. Now each of these modulators is a sort of analog style LFO. Basically you can set the waveform over here, basic waveform shapes, sine, saw, triangle, and square. Maybe in a future update we will add more shapes, but that's for the future. You can sync the oscillator, so it'll be either in free running or in BPM synced mode. In BPM mode, so again we're in standalone, so the BPM, the basic BPM for the division will be set over here. But in VST mode, the BPM is coming from your digital audio workstation, whatever you use. Okay, so under the rate, you see something neat that we've done on our other devices, the rate range. When you are in free mode, when you're in sync mode, obviously you just have these preset rates, which are the BPM divisions. But in free mode, notice that when I'm on crawl, then this knob has a range 0.001 to 0.220. So that would be the maximum range of this rate knob. Now, here we have an option to change the actual range itself of the knob. And this gives you a little bit more precision control depending on which range you actually want to work in. So you can actually set and sweep the knob. If you're doing some automations and stuff, then it's much cooler to be in a certain range that you want to work with. Just another extra small little feature. So this is pretty much it for the additive oscillator itself. Let's go over and look at the pitch modulation, because this actually relates to the additive oscillator itself. So over here you have again you have pages. You can see that the split over here to the pages, you have on the first page you have FM circuit, and on the second page you have OSC envelope and LFO pitch modulation circuits. So first thing that I'd like to mention is the OSC envelope and the OSC LFO. They affect both the additive and the subtractive oscillators that we will look at in a second. But the FM circuit itself, it only affects the additive oscillator. The idea behind here was that from the additive you get, even though you can get really harsh shapes obviously as well, but it's a little bit cleaner modulating sort of sine partials than going full on with modulating stuff like squares and saws that you can set in the subtractive. So just remember that the FM relates to the additive and the pitch modulation relates to both oscillators. So on the FM section, it's kind of again similar to what we did on Aeolian meditation. You can choose an FM source. If you choose MIDI, then you can offset the MIDI frequency incoming to the FM circuit by octaves. The FM basically, it's worth to mention, the source is just a sine wave. So this would be the source frequency for the sine wave. You can set it to note mode, and then the source frequency for the FM would be just a preset note from C0 to B8 that you can choose. Or you can set it to frequency, and then you can move it with move the source with the knob, or actually even type in whatever frequency you want to type in. And this goes from 0 to 1000 when you are on the frequency mode. Then obviously this would be the FM depth, the depth of frequency modulation applied from the FM circuit to the pitch of the additive. And then you can modulate actually both the FM depth itself, both this knob, and the FM, the source frequency itself, whatever is incoming from over here, goes to the FM source modulation circuit. And over here you have mod depth, mod rate, just like any of our other LFOs, the crawl, and all the stuff that we've seen before. You can sync it to BPM and everything. And you switch pages over here between the source modulation LFO and the depth modulation LFO. These are two separate LFOs. So again, this can be modulated, and the whole source itself can be modulated, and the whole thing actually modulates the pitch of the additive oscillator. Whew! So this FM is kind of advanced, and you can do really neat stuff actually by using this source and depth modulation. Gives it a whole new dimension of dynamically altering, in the time domain. And then over here, this is really simple. This is an oscillator pitch envelope. Just modulates the pitch of both of these oscillators and a pitch LFO. Again, this is the same as all of our other LFOs as far as the features. And this would be the modulation depth applied to these two, to the pitch of these two oscillators. So before we go to the effects, let's jump over here to this side. Let's stay on the sources. So we've mentioned we have an additive oscillator over here, which is really deep and really lots of stuff that you can do with it. But we've also added subtractive oscillators. So this is pretty much like almost a full source of a subtractive synth. You have two subtractive oscillators, and they can be set to sine, saw, tri, square, noise, analog style waveforms. Again, we might add some more in the future. Octave, semi, and fine offset for both of these oscillators separately, so you can do neat stuff, just like any other basically fully featured analog synth. If you want to make, let's say, a saw and have a sub bass under it, you can do it this way. You can also just put the square on a minus. You can you can do all sorts of square detunes by setting them just, for example, both to square, and then just detuning both of the oscillators, etc., etc. Everything from analog style subtractive synth. Crossfader between the oscillators, and a ring modulation, which is basically ring modulating between OSC1 and OSC2. OSC2 can also be placed in sync mode, where OSC-B is the master and OSC-A is the master and OSC-B is the slave. Then obviously you have to kind of find the sweet spots with the pitch settings on both of these oscillators to get a cool OSC sync sound. So this would be the subtractive oscillator, and over here you would mix them both. This would be the overall volume for the additive section. All these harmonics, once they're mixed together, what would be the overall volume output? And this would be the overall volume output of the subtractive section. So the OSC A and B after the crossfader and after the ring modulation, and this would be the volume of all of that coming out. So over here you can kind of mix between them. We did not provide a crossfader to give you a little bit more finer control of how exactly you want, how loud exactly you want each one of these sections to be. One small thing left on the bottom of the sources is here the Unison circuit. You have a really cool kind of voice spread Unison circuit inside, and it's separate between the additive and the subtractive. The depth of the Unison applied. So you can apply, for example, Unison just to the subtractive, just to the additive, or to both of them with varying degrees. And again, this provides really cool results once you start to play with it, and really mixes the layers, between the additive and the subtractive. You can turn the filter on and off. You don't have to use it. Actually, many of my presets don't use the filter at all. For some reason, I really like the open sound. I like to hear the additive unfolding. But you can turn on the filter, obviously, and do really cool stuff with the filter. The filter has its own dedicated LFO modulation. Depth of modulation is over here. And also its own envelope, which is actually over here together with the amp envelope grouped in a page setup. So if you'd like to manipulate the filter envelope, you would go over here, and here would be all the settings for the filter envelope, attack, decay, sustain, release, and the envelope depth. One cool thing about the filter, this is actually something we're also doing on some other synths, some other of our synths. Really like doing this. Is adding an invert invert option to the filter modulation. So it only relates to, it doesn't relate to the envelope. It only relates to the incoming LFO signal, and basically it flips the stereo, flips the left side and the right side, the modulation depth from the left and the right side. So it's pretty neat. Gives you a really nice and wide stereo filtering effect. Now, speaking of effects, the sound comes out of the filter, goes into the effects section. And over here you have a panner, a crusher, a phaser, delay, chorus, and reverb. You can turn each one of them on and off when an effect is turned on or selected. For example, the phaser is selected, so you see it now in blue hue. But also when an effect is turned on, you see the reverb here is turned on, so even if I leave the reverb, it'll still indicate that it is turned on by showing a blue hue. If I turn on the phaser, the same. Let's go over them really quickly. The panner, depth of modulation, and this would be the rate of modulation. Again, it can be synced to your BPM. This is it's called a crusher, but it's more like a sample reducer. It's sample reduction effect. Again, modulatable. You can modulate it again, sync to BPM or free. Phaser, multi-stage phaser. Delay, again, sync to the BPM or in free mode. You can cross the feedback if you want. Chorus with a neat separate feedback for the left and the right signal. And reverb with some pretty cool names for the reverb types and sizes inside. So this is Polyphenom. The last thing we didn't talk about is just the main output, and this would be just your main volume output signal. So Polyphenom, it's a really interesting synth. I encourage you to go look at the other videos that, well, actually listen to the other videos that actually show sound examples. You can go to our website, www.oceanswift.net, just register and you can grab the demo. And grab the synth, guys. It's really, really enjoyable platform for making all sorts of dramas, all sorts of pads, and all sorts of interesting and intricate sounds. Especially over here, the fact that you can actually set each harmonic and really place it where you want, in frequency, in the stereo picture, and in the in amplitude, really, really makes it an interesting thing to play with. So thanks for watching. See you later, guys.